Hi, I'm Mike Chumley from the Neurobiology of Aging Labs at TCU. This video is the second of a two-part series to introduce students on how to process tissue and cut very thin sections that can be used for microscopy. In the previous video, we had already embedded our tissue in paraffin. In this video, we'll introduce the setup for a microtome or a rotary microtome. We'll mount our block of tissue on that microtome. We will cut very thin sections, and then we will adhere those sections to a microscope slide. This procedure involves four main steps. First of all, there's an extensive setup. This includes a lot of different equipment that needs to be obtained and set up next to the area where you're going to work before you can even get started. Next, you'll have to mount your paraffin block that we produced in the previous video on the microtome in which we're going to cut. Then we're going to cut very thin sections, and then we're going to mount those sections or adhere those sections to the slides. You're going to need a number of items for this procedure. First of all, you're going to need the microtome, which is in the histology room, and a water bath that you will need to fill. You'll need a bucket of ice that you'll turn into an ice water slurry. You'll need microtome blades for the cutting, forceps, paint brushes, a bottle of ethanol to clean with, slides that you'll mount your sections on, a slide box to store your slides, and that special pen we used previously. Now, all of these items are located in different locations, some of them in the histology room freely visible, others are locked in cabinets in the histology room, and other materials are actually located in the laboratory, our main laboratory. So you're going to need to find all of these items before you get started. Okay, this is the basic setup for cutting microtome thin sections for paraffin processed tissue. And so there's a number of pieces of equipment that you're going to need to isolate before you can start. So you always need paper towels. We've got an ice bucket that's full of ice and water, so it's a cold slurry. Here's our microtome. In our locked cabinet, you will find blades. This is where we keep blades that we're currently using. So you'll probably have your blade in one of these boxes. I've got my tissue block that we processed the last time, some paint brushes, our special pen to write on our slides, and some slides. I've got some pure ethanol, 100% ethanol here that I'll use to clean things. We've got a warm water bath. It's set at 42 degrees centigrade. What happens is when we put our paraffin wax thin section in there, the wax will relax because it's warm enough to sort of expand the paraffin, but it won't actually melt at that temperature. And then a little container that I set my slides in, and then when I pick up my tissue sections, I set them back in there to dry. So we'll zoom in on all of this during that operation. Okay, so initially to set up your machine, I want to view a few parts here. So this piece right here is where your blade fits. So we'll actually slide our blade right inside of here. This is a blade guard. It protects you so that you don't touch the blade with your fingers. This lever actually loosens this top plate so that you can put your blade in there. The lever on the left-hand side allows you to slide your blade from one side to another, so you can actually use the full length of your blade. So as one part of your blade starts to get dull, you can move to a middle portion, and then you can move over to the left-hand side of your blade. So we'll set everything in the center for right now. There's also, at the top of the machine, is an Allen wrench, and it slides in a hole on the right-hand side here And that allows you, when you loosen it, it allows you to change the blade angle. So the angle of the blade right now is set about 0. And this is what we've been cutting on, so I'm not going to change it. But sometimes, depending upon your tissue, you may need to change the blade angle a little bit. And so when that happens, this is how you're going to do that. All right, so before I put my blade in, I'm going to put my tissue section in. So here's the tissue that we made the last time. So you can see our little piece of mouse liver that's embedded in all this wax. And sometimes you have wax on the surface. You can see the wax right here covering my letters. So sometimes you need to cut that off. Like that. And our tissue actually fits inside of a little holder right here. Now we'll zoom in on this in a minute, but you can see how you just pull the lever back and it slides in like that. Now, one of the problems with our wax, the way it is right now, is that when we collect a piece of tissue, we want it to mount on the slide like this, and our wax is actually wider than the slide. So what we normally do is take a single-sided razor blade and we cut our wax. So let me show you what it looks like. Here's a piece that we've already cut some sections on. You'll notice it's got parafilm wrapped around it to protect the section. But when I pull this off, there's our wax block. And you can see that we've actually cut off wax right here. And we didn't need to cut any on this side. We could, but our piece of tissue was kind of further to the left-hand side, so we could just cut off the right piece, cut down to the plastic, and then it just pops right off. And now when we mount this, the wax itself is not as wide as our slide. So now it'll fit on our slide perfectly. All right, so now once that's mounted in there, then we can put our blade in. Now, it's hard to see from this angle, but if I put my blade in right here, it's gonna hit the middle of the wax. So what I need to do is I need to move this carriage back a little bit. And there's a lever down at the bottom, and that allows me to slide the carriage. So I'm gonna slide the carriage back a little bit. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this whole this head right here, this cutting head, and I'm gonna move it back. And the way I do that is there's a lever on the left-hand side. And when I rotate it counterclockwise, it moves the section forward. When I rotate it clockwise, it moves the section back. And so I'm gonna move the section back quite a ways. And then I'm gonna move my carriage forward a little bit. And that gives me some room so that as I cut, every time I crank, this head moves out a certain distance dependent upon my setting up here. Right now it's set on 10 microns. The other thing that you can do with this head is you can rotate it up and down and to the left and to the right. There's a lever on the top. If you loosen that, then turning these knobs adjusts the direction of this head. So if I turn it to the right, you can see the head moves. And if I turn it back to the left, the head moves again. And I always know where the center point is because there's a little red indicator up here. And when it's in the center, that red indicator is visible. If I turn it more, it drops out. If I turn it either way, the indicator drops out. I have the same thing moving the tissue, the top of the tissue forward or backwards, and there's an indicator on the left-hand side. So you can adjust it. Normally we start off with both indicators in the red so that we know everything's aligned, and then we tighten that down and now the head doesn't move. And so the cranking action is you just unlock it and you turn like this. So as you can imagine, we're gonna have a blade in here. We're gonna push the wax past the blade and the thin section's gonna come right out here on this solid surface. Okay, so I need to put my blade in now. So make sure this is loosened. And I've got a couple of blades in here. One of them is a deeper blade, or the width it's wider. It's called a high profile blade. We use that for a different instrument that you'll see in another video later on. We use low profile blades. They're narrow, they're very thin. The blade slides in at the top surface. I always use a paintbrush or a pair of forceps to move the blade in. And once it's in, you lock it off and you put your guard up. Okay, so to start with this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave my blade bar, my cover down so I can see my blade. And I want to bring my tissue section up close to the blade. So I'm going to unlock this and I'm going to pull this down so that the blade is going to touch my section. And then I'm going to turn this knob on the right until the blade touches the section. And you'll want to look from different directions. There you can see now it's touching. Okay, so once we get to that point, it looks like it's hitting in the middle of my section. I want it to start at the bottom of the wax. So that means I need to tip this thing, I need to tip the bottom out a little bit. So I'm going to loosen up this head and I'm going to tip the top back, the bottom comes out just a little bit. And then I'm going to lock it down and I'm going to try it again. Now I'm hitting at the bottom, probably too much. So I'm going to come back out here and make another little adjustment. Still too much. Try again. All right, we're very close. So we're going to start with that. And now the cutting action, it's going to cut 10 microns every turn. And so you have to turn, you have to make a complete turn. You can't go back and forth like this. Unless you go all the way around, it won't cut a section. All right, so we use paint brushes to knock our tissue off. There's a thick one here. You can use the small ones. Never pull back across the blade because one, it dulls the blade and it cuts all the bristles off. And the adjustment's not perfect here. I'm not cutting at the bottom very well. I'm starting a little bit before I hit the bottom. That's okay for right now. We're going to make this work. After you cut a few times, you'll actually get to where you're cutting the bottom of the wax. All right, now we were just setting this up. I'm not collecting any samples yet, but as you can see here, the tissue that's in here is all broken. Okay, and because it's all broken, it means that, first of all of these ridges that are in here and the compression that we're getting in the wax is because the wax is too warm. And so what we want to do is we want to chill this thing. And that's the purpose of the ice bucket that we first mentioned. So what I'm going to do is lock this off. I want to lock it. There it is. We want to lock this off. And now I'm going to take this block out and I'm going to put it in my ice bucket, and I'm going to leave it in the ice bucket for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. This is the reason when you go to cut tissue sections like this, you want to have another block that's already prepared, and it can be in the ice bucket. and you get one block set up, and then you throw it in the ice bucket. You grab the one that's been in the ice bucket, you put it in, and you cut it. Now, every time you do that, you'll have to readjust where your blade is, because you're going to cut a bunch of sections on one block, then put it in ice, and you're going to bring another block out where you've already cut some sections, but the distances will be different. So you'll have to back it out a little bit and start all over again. But that ice actually makes the wax harder, so you don't get as much compression when you cut. So I'm going to put this in the ice bucket. Well, we got one section.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
All right, so here we have one of our sections that we produced just a few minutes ago. And what we're going to do is let it sit in the water bath, in the warm water bath for 30 seconds or so. It allows the wax to stretch out. Then we're going to take our slide, and you're going to slide the slide from the Department of Redundancy department. You're going to slide this underneath the section using the paintbrush to barely push the section. And then as you pull out your slide, it will stick on the slide, just like that. Now, you can actually do two sections with this slide. So I'm going to grab another section. There's another section. And unfortunately, I made that stick onto another piece of wax, and now I won't be able to get that out of there. So, but just as an example, we've got this section right there. We can come back up underneath our slide and get another section on our slide. Now, when your wax, if you have an additional section that sticks on there, once the wax is warm and stuck to something, you can see it on the end of the paintbrush here, it's toast. So you have to be really careful that your section is nice and flat in there and you don't have any other sections nearby. And you can pick up sometimes 3 different sections on a slide. Okay, now that we've cut our slides, and you would have a number of slides in here, here's the one we just did, you need to grab a slide box. This slide box is labeled female mice that were on a Mediterranean diet, one of our study groups. And if the slide that we just produced, or the group of slides, was a female mouse on the Mediterranean diet, then we could store it in this same box. So if you see in the box, we've got a section over here of unstained slides, and I've got a section over here of stained slides. And I try to keep them aligned by the same animal. So these slides up here are unstained, and these slides are stained that came from the same animal. Stained slides, unstained slides that came from the same animal. So since I have a new slide, I'm going to go ahead and start a new section and store it in here. And I would fill all the slides that I collect from this mouse, I would put them all together And then in our next video, we're going to come back and take some of these slides and we're going to stain them. And when they're done, they'll go back over on this side. Once you're done with that and you've collected and picked up all your slides, seal off your slide boxes and put them back where we store them. Okay, so now that we're finished with our sectioning, we need to clean up. So I'm gonna start with the machine and what we need to do with the machine. So the first thing to do, make sure your blade is protected. Go ahead and take off your tissue, and you wanna cover it with a piece of parafilm. Now this is a piece that we've already used. It's still fine to use. We have a roll of parafilm in the lab here, and so you just cut off a piece and put it over your section, and it's a solid wax that stretches, and so you're going to pull on it and wrap it around your section or your tissue block to protect your tissue block. So here's our other tissue block. I'll go ahead and cover that one here in just a minute. So tissue blocks are covered. The next thing we want to do is remove the blade. So we loosen the blade. I like to use forceps, but there's actually a little thing to help you with the blades. This little handle, when you close it, you can see that it pushes in. And so when you push on that, it pushes your blade out to where you can grab it. So you can use your hands or you can use forceps to do it. You can take your blade out, and if you've used it only a couple of times, 4 or 5 times, then you're gonna save it. So you'll put it in the blade box and you can come back to it later. All right, next, we wanna make sure our machine is clean. So we're gonna take a paintbrush and we're gonna brush off any pieces of wax that are on the machine. So there's always wax back behind here. So we want to brush all the wax, and you're brushing it down into this lower container because this container comes off. So we'll brush our wax. All right, and then this thing is magnetic and it sticks in here. So all you have to do is give it a quick jerk to pull it out like that, and it slides out from the machine. And so now you can probably see a lot of wax in here. And so you're just gonna take it and dump it in a trash can. When you're done, slide it back in. Adjust everything so that it's sitting in the middle. And then any forceps go back up here. The razor blade that we used to cut your block goes back up here. I don't like to put the fine tooth paintbrushes in here. I keep these locked in the cabinet. So we're gonna take those back to the cabinet. We're gonna take our blades, our leftover slides, our special marking pen. Those will all go back over and store in our locked cabinet. Our blocks will go over there. What's left? Throw the paper towel away from this tray. And then we have to deal with the water bath. So the water bath, just hit the stop button and then you unplug it from the back. You don't have to unplug it from the outlet, but it'll unplug from the back of the water bath. And then you carefully pick this up, take it to the sink, dump it out, dry it with paper towels, and then bring it back. You don't have to plug it back in because the next person that uses it needs to take it and fill it with water. So you'll bring this back, leave it unplugged, and then you'll grab a cover and cover it. And I just reached in front there. So we've got the cover for the water bath. It will go over the top of it when you're done. The cover for the Microtome, cover it back up, and we're done.